Welcome back to the Leadership Studio. Today we have another great guest to talk about leadership in the nonprofit sector. Deborah Cannon is with us this evening. She is the president and CEO of the Houston Zoo. So we're excited to have you here, Deborah. Welcome to our class.
Thank you.
I want to start out by asking you about leadership. This is the same question we ask all the leaders that sit in this chair. If you're writing a book, Deborah, and you have a number of chapters about leadership, what are some of your chapters? I mean, what are some of the key components for you about leadership?
Well, I think first and foremost, high ethics, morals, and integrity.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to be able to inspire confidence in the people that are following you.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have good communication skills. You have to have good delegation skills.
Mm-hmm.
I think you never do anything that you never ask anybody to do something you wouldn't do.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads to setting a great example.
Yeah.
And you got to get results.
It's all about the results, isn't it?
Well, it's not all, but
you
have to have the results.
And what's the big difference? I mean, you had a very rich career in the private sector,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're a big cheese at a bank, and now you're a big cheese at the zoo. What is the big difference? I mean, is it the same leadership skills, or is it different leadership skills?
No, it is predominantly the same leadership skills.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge difference in moving from the corporate world into the nonprofit world, and frankly, it took me a while to really realize how huge.
Mm-hmm.
In the corporate world, you make a decision, you explain why you're doing it, and then you put out, here's what we're going to do, and most people follow.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do it that way in the nonprofit world.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, your staff, it's good and bad. It's primarily good, but people are very mission driven.
Mm-hmm.
It's not top down like most of the corporate world. And you really get people to follow if you build consensus around, particularly when you're trying to change something.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to build consensus, which takes a lot longer than just issuing a directive and having everybody get on board.
Yeah, a lot of opportunity for drama, but it seems like that when you have a mission, though, is there more buy-in then if what you want to change is sort of on mission?
Well, if they believe it's on mission. So I'll give you a classic
People have
example.
different ideas of what that means.
Yeah, exactly. Right? When I got to the zoo in early 2005, it was apparent to me early on that we really needed to increase revenues. We had to build new revenue streams. We had to increase the revenues we had because we were not doing as well as we needed to do. And so immediately I'm talking about driving revenues and figuring out ways to drive revenues. And behind my back, people are saying, doesn't she understand we're a nonprofit? And it took quite a while for people to understand that it's not about being profitable. It's about reinvesting what you earn to make the zoo better every year. And so now that we understand, that everybody understands that when we are profitable, that we can have new exhibits, they can have new animals, they can have new toys for their animals. I mean, it leads to building a really great zoo, which includes having great animals and great animal care. And so now they all understand how important that is. And so now it's easy to get people to buy into creating that great guest experience so that we get people that want to come back, and which drives revenue.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about how you got to this point. So you grew up in Dallas, basically, and you tell us about from there. You went to high school in Dallas, and then how did you choose your college?
Oh, you don't want to know that. I went to the one school my father said I couldn't go to.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm still kind of like that.
Don't
tell me I can't do something because I am going to show you I can.
That's a little revelation there.
But I got a degree in finance, and I didn't go immediately into banking, but I went into banking within a few years. I was just lucky. I joined the Republic National Bank of Dallas in 1974 in their credit training program. And at that point, there were very few women in those roles. And so my timing was good because they had understood that they needed to hire some women.
Yeah.
But at any rate, and it was a great training program, and I went through into the international department out of the credit training program. was stationed in Brazil for several years.
Oh, fun.
When I came back, I went in the corporate world, and then about that time, we were really getting involved in building up the small suburban banks, and so I went out to run one of those. And then, it just...
Where was that? Where was the small suburban?
Las Colinas.
Oh, wow.
Which was really a great market. And then, I ultimately went back into the commercial corporate side. And so when I was transferred to Houston in 1999. I was running the commercial bank for Texas, and then came down here to be the market president, which is really, I always used to say it was my nighttime job, because that's really what it was.
Because you were doing it all the time, right?
Yeah. And then before I retired, I was running a 10-state region for our business banking unit. And
what was your title right before you retired?
Well, it was either president of the market, president of Houston, or executive vice president.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was both, but it depended on which I used where.
So not many presidents of banks decide that they're going to go run a zoo. Not many presidents of banks decide that they're going to run a nonprofit. How did that happen?
Well, we actually had not wanted to move to Houston, but you didn't turn down assignments at the bank. And so it was time for me to move on to a different job, and we decided we didn't want to leave Houston. So, and I'd been there 30 years. I was clearly over 50, so I could, I could retire. And I had been on a lot of nonprofit boards over the course of my career.
Had you ever been on the zoo board?
No. Had nothing to do with the zoo. But I'd been on a lot of boards, and I always thought that nonprofits were not really run like businesses, and I thought they could be a lot more successful if they were. And so when I left the bank, people kept asking me, what I was going to do. I had actually just finished being chair of the Greater Houston Partnership, so it was a great time to be looking for a job. And I told people I wanted to do something in the nonprofit world. So I get a call from a headhunter saying they wanted to talk to me about running a zoo. And my immediate answer is, I don't know anything about running a zoo. But it became intriguing. And I actually had been to the zoo in '99 right after I moved here because I love zoos. And it was a really crummy zoo at the time. And it really was. Cause
I remember I'd been there as well.
It was not privatized at that point. But it had been privatized in July of 2002. So it had been private for a couple years. And the board realized they really wanted a business person as the CEO. And so, we just started having conversations, and eventually we agreed on that it was a good fit. And I have loved every single day I've been there.
What was the biggest, well, you've talked a little bit about some of the leadership challenge. Outside of that, what were some of the other big differences that you found?
Well, business is completely different. It's an interesting business in terms of the animal acquisition, in terms of the cooperation that exists between Association of Zoos and Aquariums zoos. So, in the banking world, you're highly competitive against all other banks. Well, in the zoo world, and particularly for accredited zoos, there are only 224 accredited zoos. We cooperatively work together. We work together in terms of breeding programs. So we all have genetic records on our animals, and we make breeding decisions based on good matches because we have to maintain this population as a self-sustaining population. So it's a very different world. But it was fun too after being in one industry. Now, not that banking hadn't changed quite a bit over the years, but it was fun to be in a completely new industry with a really, really steep learning curve.
Yeah. Now, the zoo has been remarkably successful under your leadership.
It's a really good team.
You go.
It's a very good team.
Yeah. And so when you think about that success, obviously it's getting the right people on the bus, which we talk a lot about in this class. What were some of the other factors in terms of that success? Was it part of it a real focus on driving that revenue?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Clearly we needed to drive a lot more revenue, which we have. So we needed to drive more attendance. We needed to increase our membership. So it was basic business fundamentals, but it was getting the right people in the right jobs. And we have really an incredible staff. People ask me what I like most about the zoo. And it's working with this incredible staff, from our housekeepers and our groundskeepers all the way up to everybody is important at the zoo.
Now, it seems to me that people would love to work at the zoo. Is that what you find? Do people really feel like they'd love to work at the zoo?
We get a lot of applicants for our job openings, so but not everybody understands what it's like to work at the zoo. It's not, there are a lot of jobs that are not particularly easy.
Right, I can imagine.
It's not just playing with animals all day.
Right. Some people have to clean up after the animals,
Yeah,
take care
they
of the
do.
animals. And
they have to be. Some people have to be there at 5 o'clock to prepare the diets for the 5 a.m. to prepare the diets for the animals every day. Yeah. No, it's not an easy job.
Now, one of the things I hear from kids a lot is they love the idea where the sleepover in the zoo.
Yeah,
I guess there's
Wild Winks.
Wild Winks.
Uh-huh.
And that seems to be like sort of a fun thing. I mean, have you ever done Wild Winks where you sleep over at the zoo?
I have slept over at the zoo, but I haven't done it with Wild Winks.
Because I guess you hear the animals and they're very loud in the mornings.
Well, some of our animals are nocturnal, of course, and so when they go around after they have dinner, and then once it's dark, and they go around with flashlights exploring. Some of the animals are out that are nocturnal and much more active.
Now, talk a little bit about the idea that the zoo was owned by the city of Houston for so many years, and now is it a public-private partnership? Talk a little bit about that.
We're a 501c3 organization, which is Houston Zoo Inc., and we have a 50-year operating lease with the city. So we operate the zoo independently of the city. They provide us funding every year. And so what they did was they looked at the 3 years before privatization, looked at the average amount they had funded, and they said, that's what we will give you. And we'll increase it every year with CPI, excluding energy. And so, which has been 2 to 3.5% virtually every year. And so that is now, it's an important part of our revenue, but it's gone from being about 68% of our revenue to less than 24%.
Wow.
So,
and are most zoos around the country, are they supported by their cities as well?
it's interesting. There, at one point, probably about 15 years ago, it was about 65% municipally run zoos and 35%, differences in the remaining 35%. Today, it's just the inverse of that. So it's only about 30% of zoos today that are city or county or state run.
Wow. So you're amongst a minority of zoos in the state.
No.
Just run, not necessarily supported.
Yeah, run. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're in the majority.
Yeah. When you look around the country and you see there's so many great zoos, are there some things that are parts of other zoos that make you envious? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Like, what are some of those things that you wish? Oh, I wish we could have that in Houston.
For instance, we're in the schematic design phase to redo our front entry and to completely renovate or move and greatly expand our sea lion exhibit. And go
People love the sea lions, don't they? Yeah.
And we'll go from about 4 sea lions, we have 4 sea lions to about 28 or so.
Wow.
And we'll have a massive pool. Some of them will be available to be fed, kind of like we do with giraffes. Then some of them will be show animals, because we do shows every day. And we'll be able to seat 750 people in the amphitheater for this, so they can really see the show.
Is it sort of like SeaWorld-ish in a sense?
It's very SeaWorld-ish.
Yeah, okay.
And so when we started this, and we're in the early stages of this planning, but we're working with our architects who are out of Seattle. So we identified 4 zoos and aquariums that we wanted to go see, that we thought had aspects we liked. So we went to St. Louis because they have a tunnel that we were really interested in seeing. We went to National Zoo in D.C. Because they had a relatively new exhibit, and there was a couple component pieces that we wanted to see. We went to Fresno, believe it or not, and they've got a really new, very good one. And they've got a kind of a cave that you go in, so you're seeing underwater viewing, and we really liked that. So we've got that factored in. We've got the tunnel factored in too, although much bigger than what St. Louis has. And then we went to Orlando to SeaWorld because they've got a huge feeding pool that we wanted to see how that operated. So, but we do that with a lot of things. So
you find the best of and see how you incorporate it into what in Houston.
Now, we've got a gorilla exhibit that's under construction right now. In fact, construction will be finished in the end of December. We'll open it Memorial Day weekend, and so. It is going to be the most fantastic one in the country.
Will it really?
No, it really will be. There are 3 viewing platforms, and 2 of them are up in the trees, so you're elevated and you're looking out at them. You won't see you'll see the gorillas in a forest with no walls behind them, no bars, no nothing. So you'll see them as if you were seeing them in Africa, which I have been lucky enough to do.
Yeah.
And so it really is going to be spectacular.
Are there going to be more gorillas than there have been?
Oh, yeah. Well, right now we have, we have 7 for sure, and we've got 3 more that we're going to get, but we're trying to figure out which 3 will work best with the 3 males that we're bringing in. So, at any rate,
See, this is the sort of stuff that most nonprofits never struggle with. You know, which gorilla to bring in.
No.
So this is a completely unique interview for me because I've never talked to anyone who does this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So obviously you're still a nonprofit. You still have to raise money like anyone else. But give me an idea of your budget. You know, when you look at your overall budget, what part of it is municipal and where does the other money come from?
Well, we've got our budget for this year is just a little, we'll come in just a little under 40 million in total revenue. Of that, about 9 million comes from the city. Well over 10 million. I should have looked at it, but it's probably about 12 million that is coming from ticket revenues. About 5 million comes from membership. About 3 million comes from, we have 2 concessionaires, one that operates the gift shop, one that operates the food service. And so about 3 million comes from our share of their revenues. Then we have venue rental fees. That's another $1 million. We have development. We have donations, which is about $2.5 million. So when you start adding all that up, but the gate is by far the biggest generator of revenue.
Very good. And how big is your staff? You have a pretty big staff.
We have 400 people that work for the zoo, and then about 150 that work for our 2 concessionaires. So there are about 550 people that work at the zoo.
And we've talked about other zoos, but when you look around the city of Houston at other nonprofits, are there some that impress you as like, wow, I really love the work that's going on at that place?
Oh, there are a lot.
I know, yeah.
Well, it depends on how you want to define nonprofits. If you just say total nonprofits, I would say Memorial Hermann to me is by far the premier. If you want to talk about, smaller ones that are delivering service, I think the YMCA is great. Girl Scouts is great. Yeah. There are a lot of great entities out. Yeah.
And you talked about when you were on boards before you joined the nonprofit world for employment, you would see a lot of, for lack of better words, underperformers, right? You saw a lot of. Do you still, to this day, do you see? Because I see this. A lot of nonprofits that you think, oh man, they could do so much more, and you don't have to name them, but you see some of them.
I don't look at as many anymore. I'm not. I've gotten off a lot of the boards that I used to be on, and so I don't see as many. So I think that more of them today talk about running it like a business. I don't know if they're really doing it, but I think more people recognize. We have invested. By the end of this year, we'll have invested something on the order of $135 million in improvements in the zoo since we privatized. We couldn't do that if we weren't running it in an efficient, effective manner.
There's one guy that we've seen on the TED videos, Dan Pallotta, and he's come to Houston a couple times. Have you ever seen him?
I haven't.
And one of the things he talks about is the need for there'd be a larger focus on fundraising, because when you have the revenue, you're just able to do a lot more. Do you find that a lot of your job or a lot of your day is taken up with thinking about how to do more in that area? Or do you feel like you've been able to put together the right team so that you don't have to do that as much?
I don't do that as much. We've got a great development team. I obviously go out and meet with donors.
Right.
But they do most of that planning. So
that's a nice little luxury then.
It is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I spend the bulk of my day in terms of just overall operations.
Yeah.
So.
Tell me about your board. What does the board of the zoo look like?
We have about 35 people on the board. They're from very different backgrounds. We've got reasonable diversity on it. So we've got everybody from some just community volunteers to the president of Chevron's South America and Africa division. We've got several attorneys. We've got just a wide variety.
Is it a pretty high-profile board? I mean, are these?
Well, we think so.
Are these movers and shakers in Houston?
We think so.
Yeah, a lot of them. Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes if I'm in a room with a lot of nonprofit leaders, sort of the biggest challenges for them are, it always seems to be either the board or personnel issues. Would you say that's?
I think that's true. We have been fortunate in that we have a very good board. And our board understands the concept of governance versus management.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
But a lot of nonprofit boards don't.
Oh, I know.
So I've been really, really lucky in terms of always having a board that understood what their role was and what my role was.
Yeah.
But yeah, that
Have
can
you
be
ever
a
had to
problem.
push back against a board member who wants to be too involved, or do you think the zoo is such a place that you haven't had to do that?
Not since the very early days.
Ah, okay. So maybe early on.
Yeah. But I had to prove myself.
Yeah, yeah. One of the questions that we sent you was to ask what makes for an effective nonprofit CEO. Do you get a sense of what are some of the key ingredients?
I don't think it's any different than what makes for an effective CEO.
Talk about that.
So it's the same sort of things. I mean, you have to have the right staff. You have to delegate appropriately to them. You've got to communicate effectively. So, I think it's the exact same thing, other than the fundraising component.
That's the big difference.
Yeah, and if you've got, again, the right staff. So, we have the enviable, we're in a great position from a standpoint of being able to bring donors and let them feed a giraffe or pet a rhino or, some of these things that really touch your hearts, because you got to get to the heart before you can get to the pocketbook.
Yeah. Yeah, and really, there's no other place. No one's competing with you to pet the rhino.
No,
I mean, it's not,
that is a
no one
unique
else
opportunity.
There's no other
Yeah.
opportunity
Yeah,
like that. What's the best thing about your job?
Well, as I say, the best thing is the people I work with every day. But it's also the animals are the animals are really great. They're good and they're bad. When we have new animals, it's great fun. When we lose an animal, it's tough. It's very tough.
It must be heartbreaking sometimes.
It
It's like
really,
losing a pet, right?
It really is.
And it happens more often than.
Yeah, because we have well over 6,000 animals. So,
Yeah.
and in some cases we've got some older collections. So, we're losing animals, not every day, but
It's a
we're
lot
going
of
to lose
animals.
We're going to lose a number of animals every year.
Wow. I'm going to move to some questions that students have tweeted
Okay.
in, but before that, your biggest challenge as the CEO of the zoo.
Well, I think that there are two. I'd be hard to differentiate. Our biggest challenge right now is as we're looking to plan. We've got some incredible plans out there. So I said that we have invested over $135 million. You will invest more than that over the next 8 years, 7.5 years, which gets us to our centennial. So thinking about how we're going to raise all that money is the biggest challenge. But it's also, we're part of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and sometimes we're not necessarily always in complete agreement with things that they think should be done and things that the way we would prefer to do it. So, that's always a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, wow. Marta Alvarenga wanted to know, well, she said that Parents Magazine rated the Houston Zoo as one of the top 10 zoos in the country. Did you know this?
I did.
Yeah. Of course you did.
And we agree.
Where was the jump when you look back at when you took over the zoo? Where would the zoo have been, and how has it jumped? I mean,
Well, again, it was privatized over 2 years before I got there. So if you look from privatization, which was July 2002, we'd have been in probably, there are 224 accredited zoos. We would have been in the bottom 50, I think. So it's been a huge part of it has been upgrading our facilities, upgrading our staff. One of the things that we train everybody in is creating a great guest experience. And making sure everybody understands how important that is.
Yeah.
We added new positions. So, for instance, we have a position called a ranger, and they're first aid trained. They can handle defibrillators. they're trained to help with lost children. They have animal facts so they can answer questions, but they're there to take care of guests. And so that's a actually, I'm not sure that I know that there are very few other zoos that have that same, but they really help enormously.
Yeah.
So it's the staff, it's the facilities, it's.
So I love this whole idea of focusing on the guest experience. So if I go to the zoo with my family, what makes for a fabulous guest experience for me?
Well, first, that the grounds are lovely. And if you've been out there recently, you can. I mean, we have wonderful horticulture, great staff, and they've done a great job. So you're walking around in a beautiful environment. They're clean. The grounds are incredibly clean. And then the animals are out. Now, in the heat of the summer, for a large part of the day, they're going to be sleeping.
Yeah.
So what we do
and if
is,
we didn't have air conditioning, we'd try to do the same.
we probably would too, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure a lot of our staff that are out there all day long would love to have that too. But so what we do is we do what we call keeper talks. And so keepers will come out and they'll talk about their animals, they'll interact with their animals. So they may be feeding a lion, they may be having a lion stand up. We have the special window with mesh on it that's not mesh all the time, but when we're doing this it is. So they can really see that animal, they can hear them roar, they can watch them look at their paws. So we do that throughout the day so that you can experience the zoo and learn new things every day. And obviously you got to have good food and beverage. I mean, it's just And all of our staff, if they see you looking at a map, will stop and ask you, "Can I help you?
Yeah.
Do you need directions? If you're a mother with a child that needs to go immediately to the restroom, somebody will take you. If they see you, if they say they'll walk you over there. So.
Do you have half a dozen people saying "Welcome to the zoo" as you walk in as well? Is that...
We do. Well, it's not half a dozen. But we've got ticket takers. We've got. If you're buying your tickets, people will thank you for coming. And if you once they scan it, they'll.
I mean, there's certain places when I go to Reliant Park or it's sort of a nice thing. Right?
And we thank you for coming too when you leave.
Yeah. So it's really nice. Elizabeth had a question about keeping employee morale up. What is the thing that you guys do? What is the thing that you encourage that keeps employee morale up?
We do a number of things. It's it's hard. Particularly, we're a 7-day-a-week, 364-day-a-year operation. So we not every staff member is there every day working together. So we do every other month. We have a general staff meeting for as many of our staff members as can come. And we share all sorts of information. We do different committees where we get people involved from all the different areas. We have an intranet. Everybody does now. Yeah. I do lunches with various people from the staff every month, so that they get to know each other in different areas. Because I know them, but they don't always necessarily know. We do what we call fireside chats, where I'll sit down with a different department every year, and we try to do it more frequently than once a year, but we're not, frankly, that successful.
And you're busy.
And they are too. But we'll sit down with everybody in the department, not the manager. And so they can ask any question, they can make suggestions, and we get great suggestions.
And do you learn a lot?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
More than the manager wants you to sometimes?
Sometimes, probably. Yeah. The one who really hates it is our facilities manager, because I usually come out with a long list of things that people want done. Not a long list, but a list.
It's good, yeah. That's really good. Stuart Lightsey has an excellent question about the grill exhibit, which you've talked about. How did you go about raising the funds for what is going to be the best grill exhibit in the country?
Through a capital campaign. And so we went to the big foundations first, who've been incredibly supportive of the zoo. So the Houston Endowment, the Brown Foundation, Cullen Foundation, Wortham.
People love the zoo, right?
Well, they do, and they have been, and because they had funded, we opened a 6.5-acre first phase of African forest in December of 2010, and we opened it on time, on budget. which makes people feel good. And so they felt really comfortable that we could do this on time, on budget, which makes a big difference. And then we went out to individuals and smaller foundations. And
And did you have a campaign consultant from town or outside of town?
We actually didn't for most of that. We went to the people we knew pretty well.
Yeah.
But
And did you use someone in town or out of town? Did you? Is there special zoo capital consultants or?
No. But there are capital campaign specialists in town.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Harry Davis wanted to know about your use of vendors. Do you contract with people like for upkeep of the zoo or for other things, or are those all mostly employees?
Because
many large organizations, maintenance is
No, we do that ourselves.
Yeah, so that's all you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And Esmeralda wanted to know about, Sheryl Sandberg says, a few women rise to the top as leaders, and what's been your challenge to rise to the top as a woman leader? Maybe back in the banking days.
I was going to say it would have been a while ago. There were impressions that perhaps women shouldn't be in certain roles. I mentioned being in Brazil when I was in the international department. It was run by former city bankers, and the zoo, the bank at that time was a Texas bank. It was older white guys running it. And they just were not sure that they should send a woman overseas. They'd never sent one overseas. And so the head of international had a really hard time in convincing them that I would be okay and I wouldn't, embarrass them. Likewise, when I went out to run the Las Colinas Bank, I actually went out to be the number 2. The president left shortly after I got there, who needed to leave. So I had the job, but I didn't have the title for a couple of years until I could prove that I really wasn't going to embarrass anybody. So, but I think those days, for the most part, I think those days are over for women.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in all occupations, but I think in most.
But they're better than they were, certainly.
Oh, it's a lot better than it was, yeah.
Tamara Hicks wanted to know about whether there's more freedom in the nonprofit sector than maybe what there was for you previously.
Well, for me, since I'm running it, there definitely is.
I mean, you don't report except to the board.
To the board, yeah.
Which is a little different for you, right?
Yeah, it's very different. It's a good question, and I'm not sure I know the answer. You work every bit as hard as you do in the corporate world. You're working for a little less money.
Or a lot less.
So I'm not sure if I'd say if there's more freedom or not.
Okay. Liz has a sort of a similar question. She wants to know about your management style. And I think we might have covered this, but is it different from when you were in the corporate side?
No.
Did you have to adjust anything?
Well, yeah. I mean, I have to spend more time building consensus when we're trying to make changes up front than I did then. But other than that, no, it's the same.
Jason has an interest. Jason Cummington wanted to know that how does the Houston Zoo avoid controversies much like have happened with SeaWorld, and their whales? I mean, we're in Texas, so maybe less so. But
that's a big part. So we're not we don't have as many extremists out there.
Yeah.
Well, one, we just make sure that we don't have the problems. We train our people well. We have very specific protocols, that people follow. Now, somebody can always do something really stupid.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that you worry about. And guests can do really stupid things.
We see this. There's always a YouTube of a guest doing something stupid at a zoo.
Yeah.
Is there anything that's happening in zoos around the country akin to what's happening in SeaWorld that hasn't bothered us, but you see it's happening somewhere else and you get a little worried about it?
Well, we actually are encountering something right now. We have a really excellent elephant program. And we do what's called unprotected contact, or we go in with just a few of our elephants, and only 2 of the manager and the curator. So on a very small basis, but it's about 2% of the time of the staff time in elephants that we'll go in with them. in very specific circumstances, and that's getting ready to be outlawed. And it'll cause us some problems when we can't do that because we breed. We breed elephants, and so it's a little different when you're breeding elephants than if you're just dealing with adults and don't have to worry.
How many
about
elephants do we have at the zoo?
Well, we have 3 juvenile. Well, actually, we've got 4 juveniles, 3 adult females, and an adult bull male.
Do we have the largest population of any particular animal in any zoo?
Not that I can think of.
No. Okay. And outside of the gorilla exhibit, is there another exhibit that you would say is the best in the country?
Probably not. We've got some really good ones.
Of course.
But I don't think we have, I wouldn't say that we have
This is
anything that
gonna
stands
be
out as the
world-class.
best.
This
Yeah.
gorilla. I can't wait to go. One of the questions that Nicole asked was about school districts. How do you work with school districts to get kids interested in animals and biology?
Well, we do a few things. One, we have classes. We have a lot of field trips, and we do classes for them that are aligned with the agendas, the TEACS. Although I don't think it's TEACS any longer, but
no,
but
the STAR assessment. Yes, exactly.
So it's aligned with what they're learning in school, because what we're trying to do is reinforce their science learnings. There are some studies that would tell you 85% of science learning happens outside the classroom. I don't know what the number is, but there is a lot.
Yeah.
And so we reinforce it, and when you see it, it obviously imprints better than if you're just hearing it. So we do classes for the kids that come out. We do Zoomobiles, and we take Zoomobiles to schools, and we do distance learning. So we'll do classes that we broadcast into classrooms, and that will. They're interactive, so the kids can actually ask questions. And we show some video clips of some animals so that we really demonstrate what we're talking about.
Wow.
So.
Do you have summer programs that you'd say? I mean, it seems like zoos have the opportunity to have extraordinary summer programs.
We have summer camps. We have 1-week camps, 10 weeks of 1-week camps, and we had about 2,400 kids this summer.
Those sell out pretty quickly, right?
They do.
If people want to do that, you sign up like in January or something. It's pretty early.
We open it up in February.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, and we open it up to members first.
Oh, there you go. Get that membership.
And
do you find a lot of memberships are sold in January right before that happens?
Well, people sometimes upgrade their membership to get into. But so we do a lot of camps. We have a program for teen volunteers, and this year we had about 170 teen volunteers.
Wow.
And that we had almost 500 applicants for that.
Just to be a volunteer during the summer. But again, it's a fantastic.
It's very structured. It's a very structured experience.
And a very good one.
And it's really good for your resume when you're applying to colleges.
Really?
Yeah. And then we actually give some scholarships to teens that are getting ready between their junior and senior year. So that have been Zoo Crew, which is what we call the teen volunteer.
Wow.
And we also have a collegiate conservation program that Exxon sponsors. And we bring in 20 kids from different colleges around the country, and we had quite a few from the Northeast this year. And we do a lot of work in conservation in terms of saving animals. And so they come in and we take them to different places and let them work on some projects, and it's been very popular. So we got a lot of different programs.
Yeah, very good. Samantha Coates wants to know about hiring. When you're hiring people, what are some of the some of your favorite questions, or what are you looking for when you're hiring someone?
Depends on the position.
Of course.
But you try to. What I always try to do is ask questions of people that would directly relate to something behavior that they would have. So, if you're hiring somebody that is in a managerial capacity, I ask them questions about, give me examples of when you have done something, or give me an example of how you've have dealt with a difficult employee. I mean, specifics in terms of, so you know how they're going to react, not just, where do you want to be in 5 years, which doesn't really tell you anything.
It doesn't, does it? Chris Bell wanted to know about the number of funders, the number of funders that are interested in the zoo. Is it about you selling a vision, to get that many people that are interested in funders? Or is it just as simple as people liking the zoo? And
no, I think you have to sell. Yeah. It's like everything. You have to sell attorneys have to sell their services.
Yeah.
Everybody's
Yeah.
selling. What we did with the gorillas is our architects created a virtual tour. It's on a DVD, and it was a virtual tour of what it's going to look like. And so we took that to people with a whole proposal, and information in terms of our financials over the last 10 years, information about the zoo, what this is going to do for the zoo. It wasn't a casual deal.
People like the big vision, I find, the big idea, the big vision. Danita Wiltz wants to know, you've been at the zoo for
almost 10 years.
Almost 10 years now. And when you look back, have there been some regrets that you, knowing what you know now, you're like, I should have done it differently?
I would say the regrets have been maybe occasionally hiring the wrong people.
Yeah, that's all. I was trying to think of that question myself.
I'm not sure how to say that diplomatically, but that would
knowing what we know now.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So that would be the principal regrets
Yeah.
or trying to hold on to somebody for too long that shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
Thinking you can turn them around and.
Is that a big mistake that a lot of people make? I mean, everywhere.
Probably.
Yeah, we're nice and we keep
Well,
people on maybe a little longer than we should.
Yeah, I think we don't always fire as quickly as we should.
Yeah.
And we don't always hire the right people either. So.
How do you think? Why do we do that?
Well, I would say I do think it's hard to really tell about somebody when you interview them. I mean, you can ask a lot of questions, but until you get them in there, you don't really know what that person's going to be like.
I find sometimes that, even when people have given, references to, some of their favorite people, but sometimes you get clues there. Like, they're like, to me, and I may have said this before here, but they're like little gifts when someone doesn't give you a good reference. It's like, even if you have fallen in love with someone, you get a bad reference, you should recognize.
Listen, yeah. Well, but it's really hard to do that now because of liability issues.
I know.
So what you can do is, if I know somebody, I will say, the only thing I can tell you about them is here's the dates they worked here.
Right.
And that's if I really like them, I'll tell you that. But if I say, here are the dates they worked here, and that's all I can tell you.
I had one place where I called for a reference, and all they would say, she was a really nice young woman. She's a really nice young woman. And I thought, that's a bad reference, right?
That was a very bad reference.
They wouldn't say anything else. So, so Monica Saenz Guerrero wants to know about partners. How important is it for you to develop collaborations, partnerships with other groups in the business community or around the country? You've talked a little bit about around the country, but how about in Houston?
Well, in Houston, we're part of the Houston Museum District Association, and so we work very collaboratively. All the I believe it's 20 now museums that are part of that. So we work well together. We've worked with Discovery Green. Obviously we work with Herman Park Conservancy. So there's some people that really make a lot of sense for us to work with.
What do you do with Discovery Green? Because it's a little bit far away.
Well, but
right?
what we have tried to do is when we have zoo lights at Christmas time and they have the skating rink, we've tried to direct people to each other and give them discounts. Now that wasn't as successful as we wanted, but
it sounds like a good idea, though.
It sounded like a great idea, but so things like that.
Do you partner with any of the universities?
We've been trying to work with Texas Southern University in terms of internships. We really ought to be talking to U of H. And we don't partner exactly, but we go, we look to some of their departments to hire for hiring.
Yeah. I'm sure UH downtown would love to send some interns your way. So Ashol wants to know, she's asked some of these questions. When you look at your own growth and challenges, has there been a particularly pivotal moment for you, whether it was at the bank or now?
Yeah, I would say going to Brazil made a huge difference.
That must have been a fantastic experience.
It was a great experience, and that made a huge difference because it really catapulted me into a job that I would not have otherwise been able to get, which then cinched over. moving to Houston to be president for this region was a huge change. And then obviously going to the zoo. So, yeah.
Going to the zoo is the big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the zoo and many other nonprofits are so mission driven, but do you have sort of and this is Paige Ross wanted to know, is there a career plan? I mean, are people able to see what their next step is at the zoo, or is that a harder thing to do?
We're pretty flat, so it's a little harder. Now, from a animal keeper standpoint, we've got keeper, senior keeper, supervisor, curator. So there's definitely a career path. In most of the departments, there are supervisors, and then there's a manager clearly, but we're relatively flat.
Siobhan Wyatt wants to know if there are any favorite books of yours on leadership.
From
The
good to
staff
great.
member, you like, that's one of our texts in this class.
Oh, is it?
Good to
Yeah, I
great.
think from good to great. And actually, Jim Collins came out to the zoo.
Did he really?
About 2 or 3 years ago. You know, time flies.
Yeah. What did he say?
He was a very interesting individual.
Everyone seems to like him. I've never met him.
He was, I really liked him. He was so interested in what we were doing and asked so many questions, and just was really fascinated by it. He said it was a very different business than anything he'd looked at previously.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was.
Do you find that in general people are super interested in the zoo, and do you find others
not as
that,
many as I'd like, but
really?
yeah, a lot of people
Maybe
are.
I'm just very interested in it,
Well,
but do you find there's some people you talk to that are like, oh, zoo, you know?
Yeah,
or-
well, you know, it's interesting. I do quite a few talks, and when I'm talking about what it's like to run the zoo and actually, you know, on the day-to-day operation of the zoo, people are fascinated by that, and it is fascinating. I've got some of the best stories in terms of the animals and some of the things that happen. So yeah, it's certainly more interesting than banking.
Yeah, it's just a completely different thing, isn't it? So, and that wow. So we've just received 26 more. People are really sending a lot of stuff.
How long does your program go?
We're about finished. What are you saying?
No, I'm just curious.
Long?
I didn't ask that question up front.
So
I'm happy to continue answering questions. I just didn't know if it was an hour program or what.
it is an hour. I'm not going to ask all 26 questions. So Nicole wants to know about pandas from China. So I've talked to people.
We will not have pandas.
They're very expensive, aren't
They're
they?
incredibly expensive. So the deal used to be you had to sign a 10-year lease. It was $1 million per panda per year. If you had a baby, you had to send the baby back after 2 years, and you had to pay a certain amount for the baby. It was less, but it was still a hefty sum. And there are only 4 zoos in the country that have them, and all but San Diego were losing their shirts on them.
Wow.
You know, you just don't make enough money. You don't generate enough additional revenue to pay for that.
I was talking to someone from the National Zoo, and
Yeah.
they were talking about how they just lose money
Yes,
hand
they
over
do.
fist because
Yes,
of
they
this.
do.
But everyone expects that there's going to be a panda there.
Well, because I think they were the first ones to get a
Maybe,
panda
maybe.
when Nixon went over.
Yeah.
You know,
maybe. Yeah.
I believe it was when Nixon went. They sent,
Yeah.
and opened up, and then they sent a pair of pandas.
Are pandas the only animal like that where it's very expensive to get them?
Oh no, there are a lot of other animals that are really expensive. Nothing like pandas, though.
But this is because you're basically paying the country.
You're paying China.
Yeah. And
It's-
is there any other animal like that you have to do that? I mean, I understand getting a giraffe has got to be expensive and some other ones.
We had koalas for a while, and it cost us $100,000 a year just to buy eucalyptus for those koalas, and all they do is you could put a stuffed one up there, and you wouldn't have known the difference. They move maybe 20
A
minutes
little animatronic.
every 24 hours. So yeah, I mean they're animals that are more expensive.
Yeah.
Vampire bats are pretty expensive because you have to feed them blood.
Yeah.
But there are animals that are more expensive, but nothing like that.
Do you still have that little petting zoo in the back
Oh,
of the
yeah,
zoo?
absolutely.
I remember bringing
And
my
the
daughter
children's zoo.
there. It's so
Oh, yeah.
so fabulous. Now, I visited a zoo, and I think it was in Oklahoma, where they have prairie dogs. Do you guys have?
We had prairie dogs, but we took them out, and we had them in where you've got the little pop-ups.
Yeah.
Kids, we put in banded mongoose in there. They're more active and they're more mischievous too, actually.
Yeah.
But so we still that area where
So
they can
there's still the little.
yeah, you can still pop
which
up
is
and look at eye to eye with the banded mongoose.
really fun. Now, I'll do one last question before I ask the final fun questions. Brittany Kilgore wanted to know if someone wants to be on the board at the zoo, how do you guys choose who's going to be on the board?
We have a governance committee, and we look at. Typically, if we have somebody that we think we might be interested in, we'll bring them onto a committee and watch them and see if there's good chemistry, see if it makes sense.
Yeah.
But we also have, the governance committee will look at, different organizations, maybe some corporations, maybe some individuals, and we try to bring on people that have skill sets that we're really looking for.
Yeah. And is access to influence or to resources?
Absolutely.
That's an important
Yeah,
part
yeah,
of any
absolutely.
board. Right? Yeah, so you want to always
Yeah.
look for that. I mean, that's one of the things that I think almost anyone would want, right?
Sounds crass, but you need it.
When you bring someone to the zoo, so we're moving into the
Okay.
fun questions. So when you bring someone to the zoo, Deborah, and you want to show them something sort of special, whether it's behind the scenes or in front, where do you bring them?
Well, I'll give you a variety. We'll take them in and let them watch an elephant bath. We used to let them, and they still can help bathe the elephant.
Oh, wow.
They can touch them on the side so they can feel, because elephants are really hairy. And let them watch.
They're not as soft as everyone thinks they are.
No, they're very hairy. So those are always interesting. We'll take them over, let them shoot diluted goat's milk into a tiger or a lion's mouth.
Okay.
Let them get up close, and maybe even put some meat on the end of a skewer so they can feed them through the
Okay.
mesh. We can let them pet a rhino. We can let them feed a giraffe. We can let them get a sea lion kiss. I mean, there are all sorts of.
Do you have a favorite of all those?
No,
You don't.
I really don't. I like them all. You can take them back with the okapi. The okapi have these tongues like a giraffe tongue, because
Yeah,
they are
yeah,
in the giraffe
yeah.
family. So that they'll take this 14-inch long tongue out and they'll lick you with it, and it's like sandpaper.
Is once enough? Is that?
Well, it's kind of fun,
Yeah.
but it is like sandpaper.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite animal yourself?
My dog,
Oh, what an answer! What's your dog's name?
Miles. He's a
Miles.
Labradoodle.
Oh, wow. Your favorite restaurant in Houston?
Oh, gee, there's so many.
I know.
Well, for seafood, I like Reef.
Okay.
I like El Tiempo for Mexican food. Corelli's for Italian. I mean, there's so many good ones.
Yeah.
It's hard.
We're very lucky in
Yeah,
Houston.
we really are.
And is
Yeah,
there-
lucky and not, because it's easy to overeat.
Exactly. I know this. So, favorite sort of secret place that not a lot of people go to in Houston that you like?
Secret place? Is there a
like
secret place in Houston?
Maybe not enough people know about it. Some
Well,
people
then
talk about little parks that they like, or maybe a little out of the way restaurants. Do you have a little secret?
Well, I guess, let's see. I can't say that I do, honestly.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Where do you
'Cause I-
live? Where in Houston do you
I
live?
live near the Highland Village.
Yeah. There are not many secret little places around there. So.
No.
There is a secret policeman that hides in one of the little driveways there as I pass every day. Our office is near there. When they make the Deborah Cannon story in Hollywood, who's the perfect
Oh,
person?
Lord, I have no idea. They're not going to make it.
Who's the perfect person, the Hollywood star, to
I have no
interview?
idea.
You don't have an idea of the
No.
Deborah, you're not an easy interview. Work-life balance? Do you have good work-life balance?
What? Does any CEO ever say yes?
No, it's very interesting. That is the answer. Is almost everyone says no.
No. Well, you can't. I mean,
Do you find yourself thinking about work constantly, or almost constantly?
Yeah. And I'm out checking emails at home at night before I go to bed. Or after dinner before. When I get up first, I get up at 10 till 5 every morning. First thing I do is check email.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
When you're on vacation, you're checking emails.
All the time.
We have a home. My husband and I have a home in Montana, in the mountains in Montana. And when I'm on vacation, I check emails 5 or 6 times a day, call in for conference calls.
And you wouldn't have it any other way,
No,
would you? I know.
no.
You love your job.
That's part of what.
Yeah, it's part. Yeah. Do you love your job?
Oh, I love my job.
Yeah, I would imagine you would.
Yeah.
Deborah Cannon, thank you so much. Thanks for what
Thank
you're
you.
doing at the zoo and the success that you've made it. So much a big part of Houston. So thanks for being with us in the class.
Well, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. So next week we'll have another great guest here in the Leadership Studio. And until then, keep up the good work. Talk to you guys soon.